Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to the shir, which tonight is entitled Counting Up to One. Counterintuitive. We're in the period of time of the Omer, which connects Pesach and Shavuos. Largely the Omer is counted in the month of Iyar. For about over 100 years now, scientists have understood that thought, human cognition, works essentially like a very super sophisticated computer. Neurons connect to other neurons in fantastically complicated and sophisticated ways. But at the end of the day, the whole process of thought, if you like, the physical mechanism of thought is connection. Connection is the essence of thought in, so to speak, the body of thought, how it works physically in your head. And I was thinking also that, if you think about it, sorry for the pun, the connection really is the soul of thought. If we talk about the body, we can talk about the soul. A person understands things by comparing, by extrapolating, by saying this is like this in this way. It's what's called bina in Hebrew. Bina comes from the word bain. Bain means between this and that. The distinction between things is what allows us to think, and in a realm where there is no distinction, thought as we understand it is not possible for us. It says that the Targum says b'chuchmasa, that the Torah was created with chochma, wisdom. Chochma is something which is really beyond our ability, even though it's called wisdom. And that's why the Torah starts with bet, the second letter in the alphabet. Bet could also stand for bain, because all human wisdom is based on the ability to discern this from this, etc., etc. So, the physical methodology of thought is the connection of synapses, like a super sophisticated computer. We're trying to suggest that the soul of thought is the ability to connect. And if I were to ask you for the most elemental word in language which signifies connection, I think that would be and. And is really the elemental building block of cognition. This and that. In Hebrew, the word, well, it's not really a word, it's a letter. The letter for and is a vav. Now, if I were to ask you to give a pictogram of the concept of and, if I were to ask you to make a picture of and, take the word and draw me a picture, I think you'd probably draw a straight line. And, or and. So, vav in Lashon HaKodesh in Hebrew also has a very interesting aspect, that there are two kinds of vavs. There are two kinds of ands in certainly in classical, in biblical Hebrew. One is what's called the vav hachibur, the vav which connects, which is what we call and in English. But there's another vav which is called the vav hahipuch. The vav hahipuch literally means the overturning or the reversing vav. For example, I give you a classic example. It says many places in the Torah, Vayadaber Hashem el Moshe. Vayadaber in modern Hebrew would be translated as and he will speak. But of course, we learned the Chumash many times, and we know it means and God spoke. Why? Because when you take the future tense and you put a vav in front of it, Yidaber, he will speak, becomes and he spoke. And the reverse is also true. The past becomes the future with the vav. And we'll try and talk about this a little bit later on. But the concept is that there's this connection, not just of one word with another, but the future and the past by the letter vav. The vav is a connector. Interestingly enough, the word vav in Hebrew translates as a hook. Vavim are hooks. In the story when the Torah talks about the setting up of the Mishkan, it describes vavim. So a vav is a hook. A hook connects. That's the whole job of a hook. The vav is the pictogram of and, which is the basic letter of connection. And the line of the Omer is the line which connects those two extremities of Pesach and Shavuos. If you think about it, Sfiras HaOmer is a strange it's a bit of a misnomer. What does it mean we're counting the Omer? The Omer was a korban, an offering of barley. So what does it mean, Sfirat HaOmer? We're counting a one-time korban. Maybe Sfirat Yemei HaOmer, the days of the Omer. But even so, what does this mean that we are Sfirat HaOmer? Now, as we said before, there's this idea of connection, which is, I'm sorry, I forgot saying something else which is important. The Zohar HaKadosh says that all of the months were created with the letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the letter which created the letter in the human alphabet which was responsible, through which Hashem created the month of Iyar, is the letter of Vav. So Iyar is Vav, Vav is connection. And we've really got these two events. The Exodus from Egypt is described as a birth, as it says in the Pasuk Yechezkel, Perek Tezayim, Pasuk Daled, Umoladatayich biyom huledis. That's the time that the Klal Yisrael came out from Mitzrayim. It was like a birth. And we achieve some kind of gadlus, maturity, when we get to Sinai. Now the word katan, which means a minor in Hebrew, please stop me if something's not clear. And the word in Hebrew for an adult, gadol, are very interesting words. The word katan is connected to an Aramaic word, katua. In fact, we have the same word in English, kat. Why is a katan, why is a minor, why is a child referred to as a katan? A child finds it very difficult to be able to sequence, link together the separate, disparate events of his life. You take a child, a baby is prepared to wake up an entire continent if he has a tickle in the back of his throat. A child sees now this. You give a child a popsicle, he's the happiest person in the world. Take it away, the world has just come to an end. A katan, the perception of a katan is things are katua, now this. I once thought that actually the media, certainly the television, are dedicated to keeping us being katanim, because the whole process of watching too much television means that our attention span becomes severely crippled. Now this. And
phones?
Same thing. And the word gadol in Hebrew, gadol is connected to when Yaakov Avinu spoke about the tribe of Gad, gadol, Gad, gudud yigudenu. Gad is a marching troop, a platoon. The modern word in modern Hebrew for gadud means a platoon. The whole idea of a platoon, a troop, is that it goes forward. So the whole idea of gadlut is connection. In other words, what really distinguishes a child from an adult is an adult is able to take every single moment and plug it into the moment before and the moment after. That is what it means to be a gadol. Those separate moments that a child finds very difficult assembling, and of course the greater a person is, the more everything in their life becomes focused and ordered and targeted. One of the common things of the schus, the merit that I've had to meet the Anashim Gedolim, the great men, the great Jewish sages that I've had the privilege to meet, I think the one thing that I could say, which unified all of them, they're all very different in many ways, but the one thing they had in common is this idea of gadlut, that there was nothing in their lives which went out to the side. Everything was focused in. Most of us have a lot of difficulty, I think, taking all the gifts of time in our life that Hashem gives us and plugging it in a focused way to keep on target. It's a great effort for us because in some way we're still children. We're still easily distracted. And Adam Gadol is able to focus and plug everything in his life into the same place. So again, Mitzrayim is where we were katanim, that's our birth, and we achieve this gadlut, this adulthood, if you like, when we get to Sinai. It says in Tehillim, Limnos Yomeinu Kain Hoda V'Navi Levav Hachma. Teach us to number our days that we may obtain a wise heart. I want to speak about this idea of numbering. And what is this? What I really want to say is as follows. It's very strange if you look at the Omer. How do we count the first day of the Omer? We say Yom Echad. Why do we say Yom Rishon? Yom Rishon La'omer. There are two kinds of counting, and this is really the core of what we want to get to right now. There's a counting where the process is immaterial, largely immaterial, and the whole idea is to come to a sum, to come to a total, to get to a certain place. And there's another kind of counting where the counting itself is the destination. In other words, if you remember on Yom Kippur, when we described the avod of the Kohen Gadol, and with the sprinkling of the blood, we say achas, achas v'achas, achas v'shtayim, achas v'sholosh. It's the same kind of idea when we're talking about this, the Omer. The reason why the Omer doesn't start with Rishon is because Shnaim are not two Echadim. Shnaim are not two Echadim. There is something which is called Echad, and then the Sheni is the Sheni to the Echad. And the Shlishi is the Shlishi to the Echad. Meaning every day we are expanding that idea of what Echad is. We're not counting in the sense of trying to achieve a total. The counting itself, usfartem lechem. Now it's interesting because the word, in other words, sfira, is not to reveal a number, because the number which we actually are going to get to is a number which is beyond counting. Why? Because we don't count it. Shavuos is the 50th day of the Omer, and we don't stand up and say Hayom Chamishim Yom Sheva Shavuos Shehem Chamishim Yom. Oh, we don't count it. Why don't we count it? You can't count it. 50, although of course there's a number 50, what 50 represents is uncountable. The Maharal in many places says that this world can be mugdar, can be defined by the number 7. There are 7 colors in the rainbow. There are 7 colors in 7 notes in the diatonic scale. In most calendars, there are 7 days in the week, 7. Now, if you want to extrapolate something to its absolute limit, you would times it by itself. So if you take 7 by 7, you get 49. That's the last number we count. Why? Because what is beyond 49 is really beyond counting. It's something which is not in this world. So clearly the Sfira Ta'omer is not to get to 50 because we can't get to 50. So every day we are counting back. This is the Sheni to the Yom Echad Ba'omer. That Yom Echad, so to speak, becomes more and more clear what that Echad is. We're revealing that Echad. The word Sfira, apart from meaning obviously to count, is also means to clarify. The Gemara in Gittin, when talking about a get, a divorce contract, says that a get is called a sefer kritut. Why is it called a sefer kritut? Not just a book of kritut means cutting off. Koret. A book of cutting off the relationship between the husband and the wife. But it's a sefer kritut. Why? Because the Gemara says, L'sfirat devarim hu da'asa. It's come to make things absolutely clear. Sfira means to make things clear, absolutely clear. The Torah says in Shmos, if you remember, when the Zakenim went up to the mountain and they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, and the very likeness of the sky for purity. V'yiru es kale Elokei Israel, the God of Israel, v'tachas raglav kamase livnas hasapir, sapphire in English. The word sapphire comes from the same root as sapir, which is the same as sphira, clarification. A sapphire is a very clear stone. This is what the sphere is supposed to bring. It is supposed to bring a clarity. The Gemara, it says in Mishlei, in Proverbs, Shlomo HaMelech, Perek Ches, Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Lahanchil Oavai yesh va'atzrosehem amaleh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to bequeath to my beloved ones yesh. Va'atzrosehem amaleh, and their storehouses I will fill. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Amud Aleph, Domi Ma'arava, that they say in the western Eretz Israel, Mishmei the Rabbi Bamori, in the name of a Tana called, an Amora called Rava Bamori, Osid, in the future, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, Litain, he will give L'chol Tzadik v'Tzadik, to every single Tzadik, Shlosh Me'ois v'Asara Olamois, 310 worlds. Shneema, as it says in this pasuk, La'anchil lo avai yesh, to bequeath to my beloved ones yesh. The gematria of yesh is 310, which, if you count it up, is also the gematria of Omer. Omer is yesh. Sfirata Omer is the clarification of yesh, those 310 worlds which exist, which wait for every tzaddik in the world to come. The essential reward of Olam Haba is to see the face of Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see the face of Hashem. And he said, you cannot see my face in this world. In this world, you cannot see Hashem's face. As it says in Yeshaya, this reward, Ayin lo rosa elokim zu loscha. No eye has seen what this existence is, what that yesh is. Yesh means reality. Yesh me'ayin, existence. Existence as it is, that is what is bequeathed to the tzaddikim in the world to come. Sfira ta'omer is the clarification of the yesh. That journey where we're counting up to one, is every day we are clarifying that echod that we started off with. And of course, that echod is Hashem echod. That is 50. That is 50, which is gematria, kol, chaf lamed, everything. And we'll come back to that concept later on. Now, it says, in this world you cannot see Hashem's face, but you can see what brings you, so to speak, to Hashem's face. If you remember the Gemara, the Torah says that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see Hashem's face and he couldn't show it to him. So what did he show him? His back. And Rashi says he showed him the knot on his tefillin. The tefillin have 4 straps coming out from them. That signifies the 4 corners of the world. Yaakov Avinu, it says by Yaakov Avinu, or faratzta kedma v'yoma v'tzfona, that you will break out in the 4 directions. If you think of the tefillin, it's a beautiful idea because the dalad on the knot of those 4 straps, the 4 directional straps that come into the tefillin, where do they lead to? Remember, there's a name of Hashem which is hinted to, more than hinted to, is represented in the tefillin. There's the dalad. What's the name we're talking about? Shad Kai, Shin Yal Dalad Yud. Now, the dalad is what you can see in this world. On the face, the other side, is the Shin and the Yud, Yesh. The dalad, this world, you can't see in this world, Hashem. You can't see the Yesh. You can't see the 310 worlds. Ayin lo rosa zu loscha elokim. No eye has seen that except you. But you can see what leads there, which is called Sfirat HaOmer. Please?
I may have missed this, but what are these 310 worlds? I thought Judaism believed in 4 worlds, but maybe this is in the next world.
This is a Gemara that says this is the 3. What does that actually mean? There are 310 existences. It says it's a pasuk in Mishlei. Lahanchil lo avai yesh. I'm going to bequeath to those who beloved me, yesh. So the Gemara says that Asid HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the future Hashem will give to each tzaddik 310 worlds.
In Olam Haba.
He says in the future.
Okay.
Last seed, in the future. Mistoma, yes. And then it brings this pasuk, La'anchila by Yesh. Yesh is Gematria 310. Omer is Gemara 310. Svirata Omer, what we're trying to say now, is a clarification of the Yesh, as much clarity as you can get to in this world. Wow. And that's why we start off with the Echad, and we don't say Yom Rishon. Because the Sheni is the Sheni to the Echad, and the Shlishi to the Echad. Just as we say Achas, Achas va'achas, in the sprinkling of the blood on Yom Kippur. As I said, the promise to Yaakov Avinu, Faratzta Yoma Kedma Tzfona V'Negba, that was the breaking up, Paratzta, the four directions which lead to Yesh. You can't see the face. You can't see the Yesh, but you can see how you get to it. A person instinctively feels that he comes from something. A person instinctively feels he comes from something eternal, and he instinctively feels he's going to something eternal. That's something we're going to discuss a little bit more detail next week. That's the essence really of Shavuos. But in order to understand that, we have to break out from the four corners of this world, so to speak, as we speak of it conceptually. The Sfira Tevarim Huda'asa, as we said, it's coming to make things completely clear. There's an interesting, maybe we'll just go into this briefly, that Haman, in the Gemara says in the Megillah that Haman goes to find Mordechai to dress him in the royal clothes, when Achashverosh tells him he has to dress him up in the royal clothes and ride him on the royal horse. And he goes to find him at the gate of the king. He doesn't find him there. He goes to the base medrash. He finds him there. And Mordechai is sitting there learning with the children the Hilchas Hakrovas HaOmer, the laws of the bringing of the Omer. For that was the day in which the Omer was built and brought in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. Obviously, they didn't have a Beis HaMikdash at that point. It was between the two Batei Mikdash. But on that day, that's what the Gemara says. Haman hears they're discussing this offering called Omer, and he asks the children, what is the Omer made from? Well, it must be gold at the very least. Such an important thing. They say, no, it's barley. Animal food. And how much of that, do you have to give? A kometz. A kometz is the amount that can fit between these two fingers, right? That's how they would do kamitza. They would put the barley in here, and then they would use the two outer fingers to trim it off. And that was the amount. That was the korban omer. And he said to them, in the future, Losid, that kometz of yours will come and doicher the 10,000 kika, 10,000 talents, I think they call it, of silver, which I gave to destroy the Jewish people. That little piece of barley. He understood that Omer was Yesh. That's what Chazal are revealing to us. Omer is Yesh. The Sfirat HaOmer, the clarification of the Omer, means that Haman understood that our concept of Yesh, our connection with Yesh, our connection with Omer would push aside all of the money in the world. Yeah. Let's go back to this idea of counting. Mitzrayim, we left Mitzrayim. There's another word which is connected with counting called mispah. Mispah means number. Mitzrayim was a place. Mitzrayim can be understood as Meitzah Yam. Meitzah means a boundary, Yam means the sea. The sea conceptually is something which is without end. Chazal teaches that it were not for the land, that the sea would envelop the world many, many times. There's a famous Gemara that says that the blue of the tzitzis, the color blue tcheles, is doma liyam, is similar to the sea. One second. So the sea, as I said, is something which is a concept of that which is without end. As I said, even though it does have an end, but its end is really by virtue of the fact that the land holds it back. But Batzmusa, in its essence, it is something which is without end. And as you said, as Meir said, the blue of the sea is Doma, the blue is the tchelis of the Rakia. Rakia is the sky, is the color of blue. Blue is basically distance, unabstracted distance. It's the color of heaven. That color is the blue of the Rakia, which is basically without end. And Chazal teaches that the blue of the Rakia is Doma l'kisei hakavod. Whatever that concept is, it's not for us, we can say the words. Kisei hakavod means the throne of glory. Conceptually, Hashem sits on a throne. But each of these steps is something which takes us beyond something which is infinity. The blue of the tzitzis represents the infinity of the sea. The infinity of the sea represents the infinity of the sky. The infinity of the sky represents the real infinity, which is Ein Sof, which is Mitzrayim wanted to reduce that. Yam, as we said, Yam is something which is gematria 50. 50 is the number we don't count at the end of that's where we get to. That's the number, so to speak, that Mitzrayim didn't want us to get to. That was what we were meitzei Yam. That's what we were held in Mitzrayim, within that worldview that you can't escape. That's the slavery of Mitzrayim, to take us away. And when we broke out from that, and we finally get to the word mispah, which means number, has the same gematria as Mitzrayim. So you have these two systems of counting. As we said at the beginning, there's a counting which takes you to a certain total. That's mispah. But there's a sphira which basically expands the concept of echad to the point that it leaves number as we understand it. We left Mitzrayim, we left that constriction of Meitzei Yam, and we're traveling towards that which is past number. That is Sphira, that is connecting back to Echod. Okay, so we mentioned Shavuos, coming up in a week or so, is something very unusual about Shavuos. Pesach has the 4 cups, matzah, not to eat chometz, many mitzvahs, whole section of Shulchan Aruch. Sukkos has lulav esrog, 4 species sitting in the sukkah. And what does Shavuos have? And don't tell me cheesecake. But there's no identifying mitzvah of Shavuos. Why?
The Torah?
What's that?
Dancing in the streets with the Torah?
That's not a mitzvah.
Oh.
There is no mitzvah that sets, there's no Maisa mitzvah of Shavuos.
There's no Avoda.
What's that?
The Book of Ruth?
But that's first of all, that's the Rabbanan. There's no, on Pesach we have mitzvahs d'oraisa. I mean, true, we can't do all of them because we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, but sure, as teaching your children, right, you're saying, telling your son on Pesach is a mitzvah d'oraisa. That's a Maisa mitzvah. And we have eating matzah, mitzvah d'oraisa. Sukkos we have the 4 minim, mitzvah d'oraisa, certainly on the first day. And we also have the Sukkot, 7 days of mitzvah d'oraisa. On Shavuos, what do we have? Now it's interesting because the Zohar HaKodesh says that Shavuos is the center of the festivals. The closer you get to the center of something, the more invisible it becomes. The true center of something really has no time or space. The further away you get from the center, there's more an expansion into time and space. That's why Pesach has 7 days. And Sukkot is 8 days, 8 days with Shmini Atzeres. Shavuos is only 1 day. It has no mitzvah because it's, so to speak, the center of all existence. The Gemara says, if you look at the beginning of the Torah, it says, all of the days of the week, of the days of creation, that is, are said in the following way, except for the first day, which again is a bit like when we said Yom Echad. We could talk about that as well, like with the Yom Echad of the Yom, there's the Yom Echad of creation, but the second day of creation is said Yom Sheni. It doesn't say Yom HaSheni. It doesn't say Yom HaShlishi. But it does say Yom HaShishi. In English you don't see this because translators, to make it more, what's it called, not grammatical, idiomatic, they add the English the second day, the third day, the fourth day. But in Hebrew it just says second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, the sixth day. Why? Because Rashi says that it's actually hinting to another sixth. Yom HaShishi is hinting to a day, which was the 6th of Sivan, which is the giving of the Torah. The whole world was held in abeyance. Everything was waiting on that 6th day, even though that was the physical creation was, so to speak, finished at that point. But the whole world was hanging in a state of doubt until Klal Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma. At that point, the whole of creation becomes whole. I once thought of a moshel to maybe understand, to try and explain what I'm saying. You know when you have a jigsaw puzzle and one piece is missing? So you're very aware of the fact that it's a jigsaw puzzle. You see all the lines. As soon as that last piece goes into the jigsaw puzzle, all the lines, so to speak, vanish. I mean, they don't literally vanish, but suddenly you see the picture and you're not aware at all. Shavuos is the last piece in the jigsaw puzzle. It is the landscape, so to speak, where everything becomes complete. And when you have all 50 kol, you can see nothing at all, because that is the day of Chokhmah. That is the day where Bina, so to speak, differentiation stops. That is why Shavuos has no specific mitzvah, because it's the day of all, and when you have all, you can see nothing at all. It says in the Kedusha, Kavodo Molei Olam, his honor, his glory fills the world. Mesharasav Shalim Zelozeh, his ministering angels ask one another, Aye Makom Kavodo, where is the place of his kavod? Hello? What kind of question is that? You just told me that his kavodo fills the whole world. That's exactly what I'm saying. When something fills everything, it becomes invisible. We can only discern things by their difference. By, it's not this, it's not that. As soon as that last jigsaw drops into place, that is Shavuos, that's the empty landscape. It has no matzah, it has no lulav and esrog. It's the empty landscape which contains all creation. And that's why it's only one day, because really, notionally, Shavuos is the middle point of that turning circle, so to speak, as we spoke about the dreidel, this similar idea, where everything vanishes. It contains everything. When something contains everything, you can't see everything. It's only when it starts to separate. You get your 7 days of Pesach, your 8 days of Sukkot. In the middle of everything, Shavuos notionally should be a single split second of time. Okay, it can't be that way. Why? Because it's a chag, it's a moed, and therefore it has the din of the moedim. You have to have 24 hours. But that's only because it's a moed. But what Shavuos represents is really something which is beyond time. Yeah.
Is Shavuos ever compared to Olam Haba? An idea maybe I was thinking is that in Olam Haba we won't be able to do mitzvahs. And so maybe there's no avoidance. Also, it could be another angle on Shavuos, because we've reached such a high spiritual level that, I mean, obviously we're also receiving all the mitzvahs, so we're going to be keeping the mitzvahs. But I was curious if Shavuos is ever compared to Olam Haba in such a way, because of the high level we've reached.
I mean, I haven't heard that, but the fact that I haven't heard it doesn't mean it's not true. It's something that maybe you want to investigate. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
So Shavuos is supposed to be the culmination.
That's for sure. That's what we're saying.
That time should stop, and we should be all at a higher level and not need to celebrate any more holidays. And it's just like
let me just bring out one more point in this idea of Shavuos. Shavuos has no calendar date. Its whole temporal identity is masked. It's the 50th day after Pesach, which means that in the days when there was a Sanhedrin and a Beis Hamikdash, and nowadays we have a fixed calendar, but back in the day when they sanctified the moon by Re'iyah, by sight, Shavuos could fall on one of 3 days. That's the only festival, the only moed. Pesach is always Chamisha Asa, 15th of Nisan. Sukkot is always 15th of Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah is always Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is always the 10th of Tishrei. Shavuos has no date in the calendar. It's this, again, this kind of, it's concealed. Maybe for this same reason, because it really doesn't have a temporal identity. It's something which is beyond time. Because if you think about it, in the time when the new moon was sanctified by sighting, so both Nisan and Iyar could be either 28 or 29 days long. So they both could be 28, they both could be 29, or one could be 28, one could be 29. So you have 3 possible days on which Shavuos could fall. I'm going to try and sum up what we said. There is a... Yeah.
I mean, just in that sense, it's just in a different perspective, the idea of the Yom HaShishi, right? That would, like, we said that Yom HaShishi, like the 6th day of Sivan.
Connotes the 6th of Sivan, right? Which was the day when... But in every year it could be the 6th, 7th, or 8th. I think it's 6th, 7th, or 8th, yeah.
So what's the purpose of Shavuos? To be tempted to have this kind of philosophical experience where there's the kind of nullification of temporality, whatever you kind of can see, about this. So I mean, we have this holiday. So what's the kind of experience?
What should we try and
ascribe, or what's the experience, with this kind of this mystical, or this kind of Kabbalistic or kind of conception of Shavuos that you're trying to impart to us? So how should we approach this holiday?
Okay, so I'm going to cop out on this one. You have to come next week. Because next week we're really going to talk about really what Shavuos is. Really, I wanted to talk today about Sfiras HaOmer. Right. And the idea of Sfiras HaOmer, as we said, is another way to understand it is Sfirata Omer. Omer is Yesh. Sfira is the passageway from the birth to the Gadlus, where every day we are growing, so to speak. We are growing in our ability to plug into Yom Echad, that Yom Echad that we counted right at the beginning.
So the idea is to arrive in a state of such sleeplessness that we kind of...
No, I don't think so. I think that it's that's a whole conversation in itself, but I don't think a person should be exhausted. I think you can lose out on a lot if you can stay up all night and learn and daven. That's wonderful, but if you have to know your limits and your abilities and where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. Let me see if I can sum this up. We said a lot of things, but going back to it, we discussed the idea that Sfira means clarity, Omer means Yesh. We talked about the idea of the tefillin, that you can't see Yesh in this world, but you can see what leads to the Yesh. That is the Dala, that's Yaakov Avinu, that's the Nachla, the inheritance of Yaakov Avinu, that we have this ability to connect to that which is beyond. And that is that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Lanchil Lo Havai Yesh, that Hashem will bequeath this Yesh, these 310 worlds, 310 is Gematria Yesh. And that's what really frightened Haman so much, that he understood that we give such a little thing called Omer, but what Hashem gives us in return for that is Yesh, is true existence. That is the development of what we're trying to do in these days. The counting is not a counting that, as we said, is going anywhere, because it basically goes to a place beyond counting. 50 is something which we can't count in this world. It doesn't exist in this world. Memtes, Share, Bina, which only Moshe Rabbeinu was able to reach. But the process is the process of clarification, that each day clarifies for ourselves a little bit more, brings us closer to this moment of what's happening on Shavuos. And I hope you'll join me next week, where we'll talk about really what Shavuos is all about. And then maybe I'll just give a little bit of a hint of what we're going to talk about. Shavuos is also a very strange day, because if you ever thought about it, what do we call Shavuos? Yom Matan Torah Seinu. Why isn't it called Yom Kabbalas Torah Seinu? From our point of view, it's the day we received the Torah. And the answer is, we really didn't get the Torah on Shavuos. At least we got it, but we don't have that Torah today. The Torah that we have today, we received on Yom Kippur. That's the Torah we have now. So why don't we celebrate Shavuos on Yom Kippur at the same time as Yom Kippur? That's when we got the Torah. That's Yom Kabbalas Torah Seinu. So if we really didn't get the Torah, and in a sense, if you look at it, that was a kind of a rather sad day, right? Because Moshe Rabbeinu came down and smashed the luchos when he saw Klal Yisrael worshipping Avodah Zorah, being led astray. And so really the whole of Shavuos, really, if you think about it from that point of view, from the point of view of Kabbalas Torah, was an unmitigated disaster. So why is it that we still celebrate Shavuos, which we clearly do? So this, we'll try and answer that question, exactly what happened on Shavuos. And it's something, I think, really, if you can make it next week, it's really a fundamental understanding in Yiddishkeit.